This is episode 4 of the Top 2 Inches Rugby podcast, brought to you by I Spy Surveys, the go-to specialist survey and inspection company based in Exeter, Devon. So, what is on this week's show? Well, firstly, I just want to thank everybody that is listening to the podcast at the moment. Thank you for subscribing. I think we're up to about 8, maybe 9 subscriptions now, which is fantastic. Just really chuffed that you want to listen to me chat about rugby, really, I guess. So thank you. Obviously, if you would like to get interacting with the podcast, then I do have a Twitter account, which is at Top 2 Inches RP. So please drop me a tweet, drop me a message, let me know what you want to hear in the future podcasts. If you want to say, drop me a congratulations, good job, that'd be fantastic. Or if you have any suggestions for improvements, that's also welcome. My podcast is available on all platforms such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor, and that's where you'll be able to get hold of it. I also do drop a feed into Twitter, so like I said, follow me on Twitter and you'll get that in your feeds every Tuesday around 3 p.m. On with the episode and the rundown. So this week I will be reviewing the final of the Gallagher Premiership between Exeter and Wasps. Who came out on top? Have Exeter completed the double? I'll also review the Allianz Premier 15 for the ladies. Are Harlequins, Sarries and Loughborough Lighton continuing on their winning ways? Or maybe have DMP picked up their first win of the season? We shall find out. There is no Bledisloe Cup this weekend, but the return of the the Guinness Six Nations is here. There were games for Ireland and Italy and France and Wales, so we'll have a little review of them. I'm also going to do a little preview to the following weekend, where there are more Six Nations, with Scotland taking on Wales, England taking on Italy, and France taking on Ireland. So we'll have a little review, or a preview, of those games. Obviously, we'll have our Rugby Fact of the week. Got an interesting one for you this week. The fantasy rugby that I do with my best mate, that's coming to an end. So I'll have a little review of that. And I am debating whether on this episode or the next episode to look at Exeter and their rise from the Championship up into the Premiership, to Premiership champions, and now obviously European champions this season. So maybe just have a little look at their history and how that kind of went for them. So that's me. I'll be back in a second. On with the show. So Friday night saw a warm-up game for Scotland before their game against Wales in the Six Nation, and they had a comprehensive 8-try win over Georgia at Murrayfield, 48-7. Interesting to see that Finn Russell was back in the Scottish team, albeit on the bench. He and Gregor Townsend must have sorted out their differences, and he is now back in the squad. Totally agree to start him on the bench. Hastings has been going well, and it would just be probably a knock for Hastings if he was just let back into the starting lineup. Don't get me wrong, he is a quality player, obviously, but I think he has to earn his stripes again and get the respect back from the management and his teammates, I guess. First half was a bit of a grunt fest. Lots of forward dominated power. Darcy Graham picked up a good try just after 2 minutes. But then the rest of the quarter was sort of heavy going, with neither side really managing to get any fluid rugby going. What was evident, though, I thought, was Scotland's desire to build on the work of the Six Nations earlier this year. They demonstrated a bit of a harder edge up front, and a bit more of a kind of solid defensive pattern. Second half, we kind of saw the backs, it was quite scrappy to start with, the second half, but towards the end of it, Scotland's backs kind of ran riot. Like I said, Finn Russell came on, had a massive smile on his face. He got his 50th clap, but slotted into the inside centre position, which was an interesting one, with Hastings remaining at 10. He made an instant impact, to be fair, with two brilliant floating passes creating overlaps, which Scotland failed to capitalise on. But yeah, it was it was a really, really good game. Kinghorn's try rounded off a powerful second half, and was arguably the pick of the 8 tries. He chipped over the Georgian defence, and at this point they were down to 14 men after a yellow card from deep, and managed to flick the ball up to himself and trot over and touchdown. So a good win there for Scotland against Georgia. So it's a review of the restart to the Six Nations, Ireland versus Italy. It's definitely 1 down and 1 to go for Ireland. They're now top of the Six Nations table, and basically put in a routine bonus point victory over Italy in Dublin. I think they've got a chance, or next Saturday they can be crowned champions. But they are gonna need a bonus point win in Paris, I think, which is going to be no mean feat for them to achieve. But I did actually sit down and watch this game. It was a really good game. Italy seemed to be quite youthful side, and they got off to an interesting start. Conor Murray got in binned quite quickly within the first 10 minutes, and I did kind of think to myself, hello, here we go, we could have something on the cards here. But unfortunately Ireland, very pragmatic in their play and very pragmatic in their approach to how they do things, just kind of ground Italy down really, and ended up winning 50-17. But fair play to Italy. They showed up. They tried, and Ireland obviously on their day were just too strong for them. There was a friendly game between France and Wales, which again I saw some highlights of, and France. To be fair, neither team looked that great. I appreciate after a long period off, it could take some time for them to get back into how they were pre kind of COVID, but it was a bit, it wasn't the best. Interesting to see Louis Rees-Zammit getting on. That was good to see. He's going to be a good quality player for the future. And I think Wales do, potentially have a bit of a problem. People have been calling for Pivac to be got rid of already, which I just think is absolutely crazy. Give the guy a chance. I appreciate it was a disappointing defeat for them, 38-21. Let's not forget it was in Paris, and France do tend to raise their game a bit when they're playing at home. And they were I think Wales just kind of, they weren't able to cope with the attacking threat that France kind of had. And obviously, with Sean Edwards in the French team now working on the defence, they found it quite difficult. I think it's going to be an interesting game between France and Ireland next week. Personally, I think it could be France's title this year. I don't think Ireland are going to go to France and win by the margin they need to win by. It's just it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out. And obviously next week England are also playing Italy. I think there's still a slim chance that England could end up being crowned the champions. We will have to wait and see. Okay, so it's the review of the Premiership Final between Exeter and Wasps. What can you say about this game other than congratulations to Exeter It was a fantastic win, but I think also a lot of credit has to be given to Wasps. On the day, they were outstanding and forced Exeter into playing unlike Exeter. I think we could kind of see that by the fact that, Exeter were kicking for sticks. Wasps were continually beating them on their line, taking the ball. Jack Willis was fantastic. It was just a display, if you take into consideration the weather, which was biblical, it was obviously horrendous weather conditions. And it was, it was a bit of a leveller, to be fair. Wasps, how many guys they had out? About 9 guys out. Both their main starting props weren't available because of the COVID-19, and they turned up and they played. They put on a display, a defensive display that was, was out of this world, really. Exeter, they couldn't really get into their multi-play, multi-phase kind of way of grinding down teams. That was probably partly because of the weather, but also because Wasps were stopping them. They were stealing ball. Henry Slade's try was wonderful. It was a majestic piece of individuality, and how I think if I remember rightly from what I was watching, he collided past probably one of the props or maybe the hooker into the space and then just took the try really well. Likewise, the Wasp try was a really, really good try with Umunga, again, kind of ghosting through the defence that wasn't really there, and going under the post. And like I said, the weather definitely was a leveller. Neither side could really, put phases together and kind of come through. I mean, the one interesting thing for me was, towards the end, I think it was about around the 75th, 76th minute, where they had the penalty in the corner, and they made the decision to go for touch. I think, was that the right decision? Hindsight, possibly not. You would have just given it to Gopeth and stuck it over, and I think that would have levelled it up at what would it be? Maybe 16-all. I can't remember now. And that could have potentially forced the game into overtime. But they went for the touch, and Exeter took the ball. It was interesting because Ogray had only just been on the field for about 10-15 minutes and had already thrown one line out that wasn't great. You would have thought that maybe they would have looked at that and considered going for the post, but no, they like I said, they went for the touch, and unfortunately for them, it didn't come off. But I think you got to look at how Wasps have been since the restart. They've been phenomenal. They've been winning games when they shouldn't have won games. They've won games that aren't all the kind of all flash, all dance in rugby, but the hard grinding out games. Like Leicester of old. Definitely not the Leicester now, unfortunately. It was an outstanding final, which I really enjoyed, and full credit to Exeter. They go into a group now of very few English teams that have kind of done the double. You're looking at the likes of Leicester, Saracens, and Wasps, and now they're joined by Exeter to win the Premiership and the Heineken Cup in one season. It's a fantastic achievement, and it certainly is a journey that the whole of the Exeter squad have kind of been on this season, especially with the break in between, and then because of the COVID and the restart, but also the guys that have been there a long time, like Gareth Steenson, like Baxter, like Dolman. They brought them up from the Championship, and they're part of that success and the history that now hopefully Exeter can build on. I mean, it was certainly a result I was expecting, but not necessarily the game that I was expecting. And I think it could have been a lot different if the weather conditions had been better. It would have suited Exeter's game more. Like I said, the grinding Wasps down. So I just did a little bit of research and wanted just to touch on a few things. In terms of Exeter, so in the 95-96 season, they were in the champions of National League Division 4. 96-97, they were the champions of Div 3. 2009-10, they won the championship. 13-14 season, LV Cup winners. 2016-2017 were the Premiership champions. That was also the year they met Wasp as well, I think. 2019-2020 season, obviously European champions. And obviously this year again, like I said, the Premiership champions. So they have come a long way over a period of time. And I was checking out the Exeter website, and Rob Baxter, what a lad. And in his post-match interview, he said that he wants to use the Chiefs' first kind of double to launchpad a dynasty of success. He wants to kind of like I said, he's now looking to emulate fellow English double winners like Leicester, Wasps, Saracens by establishing an era of dominance. Exeter determined to continue the fairy tale started 10 years ago when they reached the top flight for the first time. And it took them, he said it took him years and years to win the Premiership for the first time. And he just wants to kind of continue and build that dynasty. He wants to also see Joe Simmons keep developing and kind of carrying on. I mean, that kid's got a future. Both the Simmons brothers, they're massive future for Exeter without doubt. Interestingly now, Jack Knoll, who ruptured toe ligaments in helping obviously the Chiefs, I think it was against Racing in the Heineken Cup final, is now going to be out of the reckoning for the rest of for the England's final game against Italy, and then the 4-test Autumn Nations Cup, which is coming up. I think it was really interesting the fact that he made that decision to basically take himself out of the England team and focus on his home club. Fair play to the lad. There would have been a lot of potential to earn money from playing for England, obviously in the Autumn's Cup and the final Six Nations game against Italy. But once obviously all the celebrations for doing the double have kind of eased, he's going to be going under the knife to get his toe sorted out. My understanding was he was able to play in the games or in the final because of intense rehabilitation. And he, credit to him, he was outstanding in the game, both games. Was a massive help to getting them, securing the double. So as I said, Eddie has named his England squad. Something that I really am surprised about is the fact that neither Joe or Sam is in the squad. I'm quite shocked by that, if I'm honest. Sam is the European European player of the season. Joe's obviously just led his team to, he's the youngest captain to lead his team to a European and Premiership double, and they don't feature in Eddie's team, which really surprises me. Umunga, he's in there. He is obviously in there. Jack Willis is in. Johnny Hill is in. Karen Dickey obviously is in there. Ted Hill. I'm going to really sound harsh now because I really like Ted Hill. I think he's a fantastic player, great player for Worcester. But why you wouldn't have him in there, Sam Simmons, is beyond me. Sam Simmons is a better player than Ted Hill. Lewis Ludlam as well. You know, Saints haven't been playing well since the restart, and yet you're looking at Lewis Ludlam being in there. Yeah, it's interesting. And likewise in the backs, you know, you've got Willie Hines. Where's Dan Robson? Why is he not in there? You know, who else was it? The Northampton lad, Fairbank. He's not been playing well. You know, I don't get it. You've got Farrell, you've got Ford, and you've got Umunga. Personally, I wouldn't have Ford in there. I would have Farrell and Simmons. I think I could see Simmons just being, you know, his career with England just taking off. Sometimes I don't quite understand where Eddie's going. But, you know, I can't criticise too much. He did lead us to the final of the World Cup and is a massively more experienced coach and than I ever would be. So in Eddie we trust, and hopefully his decisions are the right ones and he knows what he's doing. But yeah, I think, like I said, I would have done things differently. So it's the part of the show where I give you an interesting rugby fact, and you might not realise that rugby balls were originally made using pigs' bladders, and were inflated using only breath. It was possible for someone to get ill blowing up diseased bladders. The man who produced rugby balls for rugby school during the 1800s was Richard Linden. And his wife actually died from blowing up a lot of diseased bladders. So there you go. That's obviously quite sad for him and her, and a little bit grim as well, to be fair. That was this week's Rugby Fact. So obviously, as the Premiership Final took place this weekend between Exeter and Wasp, that also saw the end of my fantasy rugby league with my best mate Ollie. As I predicted, unfortunately, he has grasped the crown from my head with his grubby little fingers. I thought I was quite gracious in my text messages to him. I said congratulations for a hard-fought season. As I am the departing champ, I would like to present to you the crown. Well played. And I had a little picture of some hands and an emoji of a crown, presented it to him. His reply? Ha! Thanks very much. It's good to get the crown back after letting you have it as a one-off last season. My reply? Humble as ever. His reply, which made me chuckle, it's hard to be humble when you're as good as me. And then I sent a little emoji about him being so frigging pompous and arrogant. Anyway, so that's the kind of banter that we have in our little group, and yeah, no, fair play to him. He did well, and I am already preparing for next season to take that crown right back off of him, because he definitely has had it far too long. So one thing I didn't mention in the rundown of this episode was I wanted to talk about some news that has come out of Leicester Tigers this week, in that it is changing the name of the ground. It still keeps the Welford Road, but it's going to be known as Matolly Woods Welford Road. So the club have entered into a 5-year deal with a wealth management firm. Now, I get that. They're rebranding the name of the ground, but it's been Welford Road for like the last, 128 years or something ridiculous like that. It's the heart of rugby in Leicester. It's an iconic name. It is, when you say Welford Road, you think Leicester Tigers, champions of England, all the great names that have played for them, like Back, Johnson, Kay, Tuolangi, they all emulate from Welford Road. And I understand that the club has lost like 7 million or 6 million, whatever it is, since the pandemic has happened, but to change something that is synonymous with Leicester Tigers, I just think is a little bit crazy. Now, social media went a bit crazy. Votes, people have kind of, there's positives and there's negatives. There's a few votes of confidence, so good decision at the moment as rugby needs all the external support it can get. Another person said it's a sensible business decision. We need income and COVID hasn't helped. To the absolutely ridiculous, I'll never call it that as long as I have a hole in my hoop. Disagree over the rebrand of the stadium. To me, it will always be Welford Road, as the stand to me is still the Crumbie stand. So yeah, a lot of kind of positives and negatives really for that rebranding of Welford Road. For me, I can't even say the name if I'm honest, so it'll just be Welford Road and that's it. I'm going to take a look at round 3 of the Allianz Premier 15s. Interesting, unfortunately, that the game on Friday night between Gloucester, Hartpury and Sale had to be called off due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some Sale players had tested positive. They work in the local community and obviously have been kind of exposed to the virus. Unfortunately the game was postponed. That's the second game this season that has fallen foul of the virus, and I think next week one of the games that earlier on in the season that had been cancelled will be played, and there's no kind of, I think it was a week off for the ladies game next week, but this game's being played. Worcester versus Wasps was an interesting game with Wasps coming out on top, winning 22-7 against Worcester. Interesting game. Both teams played quite well, but Worcester unfortunately just couldn't kind of keep the momentum going, and Wasps are playing quite well at the moment. I'll be honest, I haven't actually had a chance to see any footage of the Bristol Loughborough Lightning game. So all I can say is that Loughborough Lightning won 12-5. That potentially was a close encounter looking at that. And Exeter lost to Quins 33-14. So Quins continue with their winning streak. I think they've won all 3 rounds, and unfortunately Exeter ladies are yet to secure that first win in the league. Again, I had a look on Exeter's website, and their coach Susie Appleby has kind of given a review of the game, and she was feeling disappointed to come away with the loss against Harlequins. The game was played in abysmal conditions, and Harlequins got themselves off to an early lead, going 21-0 up before the half-time break. But again, it was a second half that saw the Chiefs rally, claiming converted tries through their prop Olivia De Merchant and their debutante Kaylee Armstrong. And Susie kind of said that she felt that they didn't perform quite as well as they had done in the previous 2 weeks, despite the conditions. She noted that Harlequins had adapted well to the conditions. They've got some powerful runners which they use well, and they also played a pretty smart kicking game in the first half when they had the win behind them. I think don't be too hard on yourself, Exeter ladies. Things happen, and in time I'm sure we or you can emulate your male counterparts. Unfortunately for Durham Sharks, it was another loss. They were beaten 72-0 by Saracens. Again, it was very wet and windy for Sarries. Tamara Taylor started for them in the first half against the Royal Club. DMP did quite well to hold them, to be fair. It was only 22-0 to Sarries at the break. But then after the break, it was a totally different story where they shipped a further 50 points. And yeah, it's sad times for DMP, Durham Sharks. Hopefully they can start to turn their season around. So just looking at the leaderboard, we've got Harlequins, Saracens and Loughborough Lightning are the top three. Harlequins and Saracens are both played 3, won 3 and sit at the top on 15 points, with Loughborough Lightning down in third place with 14. And as I said, unfortunately, at the bottom, we've got DMP Durham, Sale and Exeter. I'm assuming Exeter must have picked up a couple of bonus points to be above the bottom two. So like I said, there is only one game next week, which is the game that was cancelled the previous week. I think Sale are involved in that, but I'm not 100% sure who the other team is. So I will review that in next week's episode. That's the end of episode 4. Thank you very much for listening. Just want to say thanks again to I Spy Surveys for agreeing to sponsor the show. Without them, it wouldn't be happening. What am I going to look forward to next week? The end of the Six Nations. We'll have a chat about what happened there. I'll also have a look at the end of the Ladies Six Nations. Pretty certain that England ladies will be crowned champions again. I think they actually have this week, but I forgot to review them, so apologies there. And we will be looking forward to the autumn internationals. That's coming up as well soon. And maybe have a little look at what might be happening when the Premiership starts up again. So if you would like to follow me on Twitter, it's at the 2 Top Inches RP for Rugby Podcast. You can get links to the episodes on there and general information and stuff that I find interesting. Or you could also subscribe on Anchor, YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thanks for listening, and I will be with you again soon.